Chapter 5 The Dementor. Tom woke Harry the next morning with his usual toothless grin and a cup of tea. Harry got dressed and was just persuading a disgruntled Hedwig to get back into her cage when Ron banged his way into the room, pulling a sweatshirt over his head and looking irritable. The sooner we get on the train, the better, he said. At least I can get away from Percy at Hogwarts. Now he's accusing me of dripping tea on his photo of Penelope Clearwater. You know, Ron grimaced. His girlfriend, she's hidden her face under the frame because her nose has gone all blotchy. I've got something to tell you, Harry began, but they were interrupted by Fred and George, who had looked in to congratulate Ron on infuriating Percy again. They headed down to breakfast, where Mr. Weasley was reading the front page of the Daily Prophet with a furrowed brow, and Mrs. Weasley was telling Hermione and Ginny about a love potion she did made as a young girl. All three of them were rather giggly. What were you saying? Ron asked Harry as they sat down. Later, Harry muttered as Percy stormed in. Harry had no chance to speak to Ron or Hermione in the chaos of leaving. They were too busy having all their trunks down the leaky cauldron's narrow staircase and piling them up near the door, with Hedwig and Hermes Percy Screech Owl perched on top in their cages. A small wicker work basket stood beside the heap of trunks, spitting loudly. It's all right, Crookshanks. Hermione cawed through the wickerwork. I will let you out on the train. You won't, snapped Ron. What about poor Scabbers? He pointed at his chest where a large lump indicated that Scabbers was curled up in his pocket. Mr. Weasley, who had been outside waiting for the ministry car, stuck his head inside. They are here, he said. Harry, come on. Mr. Weasley marched Harry across the short stretch of pavement towards the first of two old-fashioned dark green cars, each of which was driven by a furtive-looking wizard wearing a suit of emerald velvet. In you get, Harry, said Mr. Weasley, glancing up and down the crowded street. Harry got into the back of the car and was shortly joined by Hermione and Ron to Ron's disgust, Percy. The journey to King's Cross was very uneventful compared with Harry's trip on the night bus. The Ministry of Magic cars seemed almost ordinary, though Harry noticed that they could slide through gaps that Uncle Vernon's new company car certainly couldn't have managed. They reached King's Cross with 20 minutes to spare. The ministry drivers found them trolleys, unloaded their trunks, touched their hats in salute to Mr. Weasley, and drove away, somehow managing to jump to the head of an unmoving line at the traffic lights. Mr. Weasley kept close to Harry's elbow all the way into the station. Right then, he said, glancing around them, let's do this in pairs. As there are so many of us, I will go through first with Harry. Mr. Weasley strolled towards the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, pushing Harry's trolley and apparently very interested in the Intercity 125 that had just arrived at platform 9. With a meaningful look at Harry, he leaned casually against the barrier. Harry imitated him. In a moment, they had fallen sideways through the solid metal onto platform 9 and 3/4 and looked up to see the Hogwarts Express, a scarlet steam engine puffing smoke over a platform packed with witches and wizards seeing their children onto the train. Percy and Ginny suddenly appeared behind Harry. They were panting and had apparently taken the barrier at a run. Ah, there is Penelope, said Percy, smoothing his hair and going pink again. Ginny caught Harry's eye, and they both turned away to hide their laughters as Percy strode over to a girl with long curly hair, walking with his chest thrown out so that she couldn't miss his shiny badge. Once the remaining Weasleys and Hermione had joined them, Harry and Ron led the way to the end of the train, past packed compartments to a carriage that looked quite empty. They loaded the trunks onto it, stored Hedwig and Crookshanks in the luggage rack. They went back outside to say goodbye to Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. Mrs. Weasley kissed all her children, then Hermione, and finally Harry. He was embarrassed but really quite pleased when she gave him an extra hug. Do care, won't you, Harry? She said as she straightened up, her eyes oddly bright. Then she opened her enormous handbag and said, I have made you all sandwiches. Here you are, Ron. They are not corned beef. Where is Fred? Here you are, dear. Harry, said Mr. Weasley quietly, come over here a minute. He jerked his head towards a pillar and Harry followed him behind it. leaving the others crowded around Mrs. Weasley. "There is something I've got to tell you before you leave," said Mr. Weasley in a tense voice. "It's all right, Mr. Weasley," said Harry. "I already know." "You know? How could you know?" I heard you and Mrs. Weasley talking last night. I couldn't help hearing," Harry added quickly. "Sorry." "That's not the way I did have chosen for you to find out," said Mr. Weasley, looking anxious. "No, honestly, it's okay this way. You haven't broken your word to Fudge, and I know what's going on." "Harry, you must be very scared." "I'm not," said Harry sincerely. "Really?" he added, because Mr. Weasley was looking disbelieving. "I'm not trying to be a hero, but seriously, Sirius Black can't be worse than Voldemort, can he?" Mr. Weasley flinched at the sound of the name but overlooked it. "Harry, I knew you were well made of stronger stuff than Fudge seems to think, and I'm obviously pleased that you are not scared. But Arthur," called Mrs. Weasley, who was now shepherding the rest onto the train. "Arthur, what are you doing? It's about to go." "He's coming, Molly," said Mr. Weasley, but he turned back to Harry and kept talking in a lower and more hurried voice. "Listen, I want you to give me your word that I will be a good boy and stay in the castle," said Harry gloomily. "Not entirely," said Mr. Weasley, who looked more serious than Harry had ever seen him. "Harry, swear to me you won't go looking for Black." Harry stared. "What?" There was a loud whistle. Guards were walking along the train, slamming all the doors shut. "Promise me," Harry said, Mr. Weasley, talking more quickly still, that whatever happens, why would I go looking for someone I know wants to kill me?" said Harry blankly. "Swear to me that whatever you might hear," Arthur quickly cried Mrs. Weasley. Steam was billowing from the train. It had started to move. Harry ran to the compartment door and Ron threw it open and stood back to let him on. They leaned out of the window and waved at Mr. and Mrs. Weasley until the train turned a corner and blocked them from view. "I need to talk to you in private," Harry muttered to Ron and Hermione as the train picked up speed. "Go away, Ginny," said Ron. "Oh, that's nice," said Ginny huffily, and she talked off. Harry, Ron, and Hermione set off down the corridor looking for an empty compartment, but all were full except for the one at the very end of the train. This had only one occupant, a man sitting fast asleep next to the window. Harry, Ron, and Hermione checked on the threshold. The Hogwarts Express was usually reserved for students, and they had never seen an adult there before except for the witch who pushed a food cart. The stranger was wearing an extremely shabby set of wizard's robes that had been darned in several places. He looked ill and exhausted. Though quite young, his light brown hair was flecked with green. "Who did you reckon he is?" Ron hissed as they sat down and slid the door shut. Taking the seats farthest away from the window, Professor R.J. Lupin whispered Hermione at once. "How did you know that?" "It's on his case," she replied, pointing at the luggage rack over the man's head, where there was a small battered case held together with a large quantity of neatly knotted string. The name Professor R.J. Lupin was stamped across one corner in peeling letters. "Wonder what he teaches," said Ron, frowning at Professor Lupin's pallid profile. "That's obvious," whispered Hermione. "There's only one vacancy, isn't there? Defense against the dark arts." Harry, Ron, and Hermione had already had two Defense against the dark arts teachers, both of whom had lasted only 1 year. There were rumors that the job was jinxed. "Well, I hope he's up to it," said Ron doubtfully. "He looks like one good hex would finish him off, doesn't it?" Anyway, he turned to Harry. "What were you going to tell us?" Harry explained all about Mr. and Mrs. Weasley's argument and the warning Mr. Weasley had just given him. When he did finish, Ron looked thunderstruck and Hermione had her hands over her mouth. She finally lowered them to say, "Sirius Black escaped to come after you. Oh, Harry, you will have to be really, really careful. Don't go looking for trouble, Harry." "I don't go looking for trouble," said Harry, nettled. "Trouble usually finds me." "How thick would Harry have to be to go for looking for a nutter who wants to kill him?" said Ron shakily. They were taking the news worse than Harry had expected. Both Ron and Hermione seemed to be much more frightened of Black than he was. "No one knows how he got out of Azkaban," said Ron uncomfortably. "No one's ever done it before, and he was a top security prisoner too." "But they will catch him, won't they?" said Hermione earnestly. "I mean, they have got all the muggles looking out for him too." "What's that noise?" said Ron suddenly. A faint, tiny sort of whistle was coming from somewhere. They looked all around the compartment. "Is coming from your trunk, Harry," said Ron, standing up and reaching into the luggage rack. A moment later, he had pulled the pocket sneakoscope out from between Harry's robes. It was spinning very fast in the palm of Ron's hand and glowing brilliantly. "Is that a sneakoscope?" said Hermione interestedly, standing up for a better look. "Yeah, mind you, it's a very cheap one," Ron said. "It went haywire just as I was trying it to Errol's leg to send it to Harry. Were you doing anything untrustworthy at the time?" said Hermione shrewdly. "No, well, I wasn't supposed to be using Errol. You know he's not really up to long journeys. But how else was I supposed to get Harry's present to him?" "Stick it back in the trunk," Harry advised, as the sneakoscope whistled piercingly, or it will wake him up. He nodded towards Professor Lupin. Ron stuffed the sneakoscope into a particularly horrible pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks, which deadened the sound, then closed the lid of the trunk on it. "We could get it checked in Hogsmeade," said Ron, sitting back down. "They sell all that sort of things in Dervish and Banks, magical instruments and stuff. Fred and George told me." "Do you know much about Hogsmeade?" asked Hermione keenly. "I have read it's the only entirely non-Muggle settlement in Britain." "Yeah, I think it is," said Ron in an offhand sort of way, "but that's not why I want to go. I just want to get inside Honeydukes." "What's that?" said Hermione. "Is the sweet shop," said Ron, a dreamy look coming over his face, where they have got everything pepper imps. They make you smoke at the mouth, and great fat choco balls full of strawberry mousse and clotted cream, and really excellent sugar quills which you can suck in class and just look like you are thinking what to write next." "But Hogsmeade's a very interesting place, isn't it?" Hermione pressed on eagerly. "In sites of historical sorcery, it says the inn was the headquarters for the 1612 Goblin Rebellion, and the Shrieking Shack supposed to be the most severely haunted building in Britain, and massive sherbet balls that make you levitate a few inches off the ground while you are sucking them," said Ron, who was plainly not listening to a word Hermione was saying. Hermione looked around at Harry. "Won't it be nice to get out of school for a bit and explore Hogsmeade?" "'Spect it will," said Harry heavily. "You will have to tell me when you have found out." "What did you mean?" said Ron. "I can't go. The Dursleys didn't sign my permission form, and Fudge wouldn't either." Ron looked horrified. "You are not allowed to come, but no way McGonagall or someone will give you permission." Harry gave a hollow laugh. "Professor McGonagall, head of Gryffindor House, was very strict. Or we can ask Fred and George. They know every secret passage out of the castle." "Ron," said Hermione sharply, "I don't think Harry should be sneaking out of the school with Black on the loose." "Yeah, I expect that's what McGonagall will say when I ask for permission," said Harry bitterly. "But if we were with him," said Ron spiritedly to Hermione, "Black wouldn't dare." "Oh, Ron, don't talk rubbish," snapped Hermione. "Black's already murdered a whole bunch of people in the middle of a crowded street. Do you really think he's going to worry about attacking Harry just because we are there?" She was fumbling with the straps of Crookshank's basket as she spoke. "Don't let that thing out," Ron said, but too late. Crookshanks leapt lightly from the basket, stretched, yawned, and sprang onto Ron's knees. The lump in Ron's pocket trembled, and he shoved Crookshanks angrily away. "Get out of here, Ron!" "Don't," said Hermione angrily. Ron was about to answer back when Professor Lupin stirred. They watched him apprehensively, but he simply turned his head the other way, mouth slightly open, and slept on. The Hogwarts Express moved steadily north, and the scenery outside the window became wilder and darker while the crowds overhead thickened. People were chasing backward and forward past the door of their compartment. Crookshanks had now settled in an empty seat, his squashed face turned towards Ron, his yellow eyes on Ron's top pocket. At 1 o'clock, the plump witch with the food cart arrived at the compartment door. "Do you think we should wake him up?" Ron asked awkwardly, nodding towards Professor Lupin. "He looks like he could do with some food." Hermione approached Professor Lupin cautiously. "Professor," she said. "Excuse me, Professor." He didn't move. "Don't worry, dear," said the witch as she handed Harry a last stack of cauldron cakes. "If he is hungry when he wakes, I will be up front with the driver." "I suppose he is asleep," said Ron quietly as the witch slid the compartment door closed. "I mean, he hasn't died, has he?" "No, no, he is breathing," whispered Hermione, taking the cauldron cake Harry passed her. "He might not be very good company, but Professor Lupin's presence in their compartment has had its uses." Mid-afternoon, just as it had started to rain, blurring the rolling hills outside the window, they heard footsteps in the corridor again, and their three least favorite people appeared at the door: Draco Malfoy, flanked by his cronies Vincent Crabbe and Gregory Goyle. Draco Malfoy and Harry had been enemies ever since they had met on their very first train journey to Hogwarts. Malfoy, who had a pale, pointed, sneering face, was in Slytherin House. He played Seeker on the Slytherin Quidditch team, the same position that Harry played on the Gryffindor team. Crabbe and Goyle seemed to exist to do Malfoy's bidding. They were both wide and muscly. Crabbe was taller with a pudding bowl haircut and very thick neck. Goyle had short, bristly hair and long gorilla-ish arms. Well, look who it is, said Malfoy in his usually lazy drawl, pulling open the compartment door. Potty and the Weasel. Crabbe and Goyle chucked trollishly. I heard your father finally got his hands on some gold this summer, Weasley, said Malfoy. Did your mother die of shock? Ron stood up so quickly he knocked Crookshank's basket to the floor. Professor Lupin gave a snort. Who's that? Said Malfoy, taking an automatic step backward as he spotted Lupin. New teacher, said Harry, who got to his feet too in case he needed to hold Ron back. What were you saying, Malfoy? Malfoy's pale eyes narrowed. He wasn't fool enough to pick a fight right under a teacher's nose. Come on, he muttered resentfully to Crabbe and Goyle, and they disappeared. Harry and Ron sat down again, Ron massaging his knuckles. I'm not going to take any crap from Malfoy this year, he said angrily. I mean it. If he makes one more crack about my family, I'm going to hold of his head and... Ron made a violent gesture in midair. Ron hissed, Hermione pointing at Professor Lupin, be careful. But Professor Lupin was fast asleep. The rain thickened as the train sped yet farther north. The windows were now a solid, shimmering grey which gradually darkened until lanterns flickered into life all along the corridors and over the luggage racks. The train rattled, the rain hammered, and the wind roared, but still Professor Lupin slept. We must be nearly there, said Ron, leaning forward to look past Professor Lupin at the now completely black window. The windows had hardly left him when the train started to slow down. Great, said Ron, getting up and walking carefully past Professor Lupin to try and see outside. I am starving. I want to get to the feast. We can't be there yet, said Hermione, checking her watch. So why are we stopping? The train was getting slower and slower as the noise of the pistons fell away. The wind and rain sounded louder than ever against the windows. Harry, who was nearest the door, got up to look into the corridor all along the carriage. Heads were sticking curiously out of the compartments. The train came to a stop with a jolt, and distant thuds and bangs told them that luggage had fallen out of the racks. Then, without warning, all the lamps went out and they were plunged into total darkness. What's going on? Said Ron's voice from behind Harry. Ouch! Gasped Hermione. Ron, that was my foot. Harry felt his way back to his seat. Do you think we have broken down? Don't know. There was a squeaking sound, and Harry saw the dim black outline of Ron wiping a patch clean on the window and peering out. There's something moving out there, Ron said. I think people are coming aboard. The compartment door suddenly opened and someone fell painfully over Harry's legs. Sorry, do you know what's going on? Ouch, sorry. Hello, Neville, said Harry, feeling around in the dark and pulling Neville up his cloak. Harry, is that you? What's happening? No idea. Sit down. There was a loud hissing and a yelp of pain. Neville had tried to sit on Crookshanks. I'm going to go and ask the driver what's going on, came Hermione's voice. Harry felt her pass him, heard the door slid open, and then a third and two loud squeals of pain. Who's that? Who's that? Ginny? Hermione, what are you doing? I was looking for Ron. Come in and sit down. Not here, said Harry hurriedly. I'm here. Ouch, said Neville. Quiet, said a hoarse voice suddenly. Professor Lupin appeared to have woken up at last. Harry could hear movements in his corner. None of them spoke. There was a soft crackling noise and a shivering light filled the compartment. Professor Lupin appeared to be holding a handful of flames. They illuminated his tired, grey face, but his eyes looked alert and wary. Stay where you are, he said in the same hoarse voice, and he got slowly to his feet with his handful of fire held out in front of him. But the door slid slowly open before Lupin could reach it. Standing in the doorway, illuminated by the shivering flames in Lupin's hand, was a cloaked figure that towered to the ceiling. His face was completely hidden beneath its hood. Harry's eyes darted downward, and what he saw made his stomach contract. There was a hand protruding from the clock, and it was glistening, greyish, slimy looking, and scabbed like something dead that had decayed in water. But it was visible only for a split second, as though the creature beneath the clock sensed Harry's gaze. The hand was suddenly withdrawn into the folds of his black cloak, and then the thing beneath the hood, whatever it was, drew a long, slow, rattling breath as though it were trying to suck something more than air from his surroundings. An intense cold swept over them all. Harry felt his own breath catch in his chest. The whole the cold went deeper than his skin. It was inside his chest, it was inside his very heart. Harry's eyes rolled up into his head. He couldn't see. He was drowning in cold. There was a rushing in his ears as though of water. He was being dragged down, the roaring growing louder. And then far away he heard screaming, terrible, terrified, pleading screams. He wanted to help whoever it was. He tried to move his arms but couldn't. A thick white fog was swirling around him, inside him. Harry, Harry, are you alright? Someone was slapping his face. What? Harry opened his eyes. There were lanterns above him, and the floor was shaking. The Hogwarts Express was moving again, and the lights had come back on. He seemed to have slid out of his seat onto the floor. Ron and Hermione were kneeling next to him, and above them he could see Neville and Professor Lupin watching. Harry felt very sick. When he put up his hand to push his glasses back on, he felt cold sweat on his face. Ron and Hermione heaved him back onto his seat. Are you okay? Ron asked nervously. Yeah, said Harry, looking nervously. Said Harry, looking towards the door. The hooded creature had vanished. What happened? Where is that thing? Who screamed? No one screamed, said Ron more nervously still. Harry looked around the bright compartment. Ginny and Neville looked back at him. Both were very pale. I heard, but I heard screaming. A loud snap made them all jump. Professor Lupin was breaking an enormous slab of chocolate into pieces. Here, he said to Harry, handing him a particularly large piece. Eat it, it will help. Harry took the chocolate but didn't eat it. What was that thing? He asked Lupin. A Dementor, said Lupin, who was now giving chocolate to everyone else. One of the Dementors of Azkaban. Everyone stared at him. Professor Lupin crumbled up the empty chocolate wrapper and put it in his pocket. Eat, he repeated. It will help. I need to speak to the driver. Excuse me. He strolled past Harry and disappeared into the corridor. Are you sure you are okay, Harry? Said Hermione, watching Harry anxiously. I don't get it. What happened? Said Harry, wiping more sweat off his